Hey Alexis,
Hey,
did you know that sea otters have pockets under their arms to store their favorite rocks?
like their skin
Yeah,
has a pocket,
yeah.
like a
Or
kangaroo,
like
but
it's like a extra bit of like fat under their arms that they can like kind of store under.
that is so neat. I
I
love that.
kind of wish that we knew more of like why they do that or like the behavior because I know we
Yeah.
know how they hold hands to like not float away from each other, but
Uh-huh.
I think it's important to know why those behaviors are, I guess, predominant in the wild because then we can better understand the species.
hmm
But it's also nice that we do have programs like at zoos and aquariums that can study things like that and let us know so that we can better understand that animal.
Yeah.
But, anyways, hey everyone, we're Green
Hey
Thread.
guys. Hey.
I'm Allie,
I'm Alexis.
and we're here to pull on that thread to connect you to your climate. Today, we're going to be talking about a couple of different ranges of topics like conservation programs, zoos. If any of those sound of any interest, keep on listening. So, I know people have a tendency to kind of stereotype
hmm
places like that, especially when it comes to like the touristry aspect, and people still stigmatize them as like circus
Yeah.
places, and that really breaks my heart because there are different, like specifically zoos and aquariums that are trying really hard to use their accreditation they've gotten from like AZA or WAZA to push wildlife education and not
hmm
just like showcasing animals in layman's terms. When I was working at the zoo, it was a constant, like I'm talking daily, if not hourly struggle that I would have to kind of cut these stereotypes down when people would
hmm
come up, especially when they would like see an animal doing something that they didn't necessarily um compare to a positive
hmm
reinforcement or positive action. And I just was like a constant thing. I'd be like saying something and I have to go and be like, no, no, ma'am, no, sir. And then like say something else. And
Yeah.
I was like, this is so draining.
And I'm wondering where all of this came from. I'm assuming it's just a lot of misinformation, but also there is, I mean, of course, there's a couple of stories of there being bad practices and things like, I don't know too many specifics on it, but SeaWorld and the
Hmm.
orcas and keeping animals like that and just the types of horror stories that have come from things like that or just bad media. I feel like that has tarnished a lot of people's vision of what zoos and aquariums do and the work that they do in the aspect of conservation and the good positive work that they do because it's way more positive than negative, I feel like. But so many just average people in just reading media have seen that negative side, and so they have that negative connotation of it.
Absolutely. And it's places like that that truly do kind of completely change someone's point of view on it.
hmm
So like they could be hard advocates for these places and then that one person just ruins the entire reputation.
hmm
And for it to be on that sensitive seesaw
hmm
is like kind of something that I was hoping to use this episode for to educate of don't be so quick to judge. But that does come with self responsibility of like being able to research the places you're going to visit before.
hmm
And I noticed a lot of uneducation for myself in this area because when I was head of the club that I started at KSU, I was trying to find places for us to go on field trips
Yeah.
because I did want to like expose people in that
hmm
club to the right sources.
hmm
And there was a lot of them, especially up in North Georgia, that were marketed as wildlife refugees.
hmm
And when we went, I really wish I had done more research on them because what they preface on their websites and how like the videos you see and everything, it seems like fine,
hmm
but you look further into like their history or their reasoning for their mission statement, their reasoning for being, what they are, and you're like, oh, that's not what I thought it was.
Yeah.
But anyways, not to be so much of a downer, as far as like what you can do to prevent from either falling underneath these challenges of identification, but also to not, go down that rabbit hole of where can I go, where can I not go. looking at those accreditations, like I was saying before, so AZA is a World Association accreditation that is for aquariums and zoos. And if they have this credibility, then they're, fine, or
Mhm.
they're doing good work
Yeah.
for research or for science. Same with WAZA. But those places often, more than often than not, actually have scientists and research scientists that are on grounds at a lot of the times to continue conservation works for certain species there. At the zoo and aquarium, sorry, I know of a couple, specifically with the eastern indigo snake at the zoo. Their diamondback terrapin conservation program is really nice because they're one of the only ones in the US that
Mhm.
do that. And then they have a couple with the sharks at the aquarium. But it's stuff like that that can help you identify that just from, you know, your phone, or like if you wanted to
Mhm.
look it up, like where are AZA accredited zoos and aquariums, and it'll come up like a whole list. And supporting those places is really important too, because that money, most of the time, those places are nonprofit, so that money is going straight to what they can do for care for the animals, care for their science and their data and everything in between.
For sure. And that goes a lot into kind of ecotourism as well. Just the amount of money that those places bring in just from people coming in and just wondering, what happens with that too. But I know that places like the Georgia Aquarium and even some other aquariums and zoos across at least the United States that I know of have blown up on social media as well. So, kind of boosting ecotourism and getting people thinking about it through social media and TikTok. Like, they got millions of followers on TikTok. Um, but with any type of, conservation effort, such as a refuge or a zoo or an aquarium, I think that's really cool that, it kind of gets people thinking about it a little bit. Like, oh, I want to go to the aquarium. I want to see this. I want to see that. So, I think it's cool to kind of spark that conversation through ecotourism as well.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the ecotourism issues happen in, I saw this term called dark ecotourism.
Oh, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, and I was like, "Whoa, that sounds very like, yeah, grimace almost."
Yeah.
And when I went, and actually pretty much is, like, it's people visiting places where they associate like death or grieving and things like that. So it can
Oh.
be not just like conservation, it could be like
Mhm.
history. But for this specific point, I was bringing up dark tourism because a lot of people will bring in the ethics
Mhm.
behind the places they're visiting,
Mhm.
and whether or not those practices are sustainable or ethical. And a lot of the time, that specific, a I guess, group of opinions come from the fact that people tend to anthropomorphize um the animals that are in that
Yeah.
place, because
Mhm.
they're like, they're sad, or they're just putting all those human characteristics on them without
Mhm.
even like understanding. Oh my god. One one specific situation that made my like blood boil almost was the lions at the zoo.
Mhm.
And lions sleep like 20 hours of the day.
Yeah.
And
They're cats. So
right,
of course they're gonna just like take a little cat nap all the time.
right. And people just don't like, they see movies about them and they're always
Yeah.
running around, they're hunting,
Lion King. We're like on an adventure, no time for sleep. None.
Yeah, better have that Red Bull.
Yeah.
Red Bull for bees, Red Bull for
Yeah.
lions.
Red Bull for animals. Let's get it going.
But they would come by and be like, make them roar, make them, make a
Oh.
noise. Yeah. Oh my god, people, like, not even just kids, it was like
Grown
parents.
people.
Yeah.
That amazes me. I can't
And
believe
I
that.
would I would have to fight my like jaw droppings every single time, because I'm like, you understand that we don't have rings of fire that we're making them jump through. We're not
Yeah.
making them do anything.
Yeah.
All of these behaviors are natural behaviors, and that is what these places are there to do, is to
Mhm.
showcase those natural behaviors. And
Yeah.
it wasn't just lions, it was like any animal that was sleeping. I'm not even kidding.
Oh my god.
It was just immediate, like, they're sad, they're unhappy, why are they here? Oh my god, we had I guess this is a really good example of people stigmatizing not only the behavior but also captivity
Mhm.
to like animals like lifespans. But there's a tiger named Chelsea that was at the zoo, and she lived to be like 20.
Yeah.
And Sumatran tigers only live to be about 15 in the wild, so we already extended her lifespan, but also she slept a lot because she was
Yeah.
old.
She's old. Yeah.
And there's one lady came up to me. This is when I was interning, so I wasn't even getting paid.
Yeah.
And she was like going off like on a Peter rampage of, she's unhappy. Why is she in this corner? If she was in the wild, she'd be so much more like vibrant and alive. And I'm like, actually, no, she wouldn't even be alive.
Yeah, she wouldn't be alive like without our help.
And she was like, what do you mean? I was like, we have veterinary care and we have research specialists who are making sure that she has the like best life she possibly could. And she's literally old. Does your grandma run marathons?
Yeah.
If she does, go grandma. But that's what I mean. Like, people just put those stereotypes on animals and it just turns downhill. And then not only is it bad for the people that are trying to educate, but it's also bad for the people that are hearing it, because then they're like, oh, I haven't thought of it that way. Yeah, I mean, but then I'm like, why are you here?
Yeah.
Why did you buy a ticket? Why are you supporting this if you don't believe in it?
Right. And that goes back also to just misinformation, as we've mentioned quite a few times by now. Just, like if people just take that automatic stereotype that's in their brain and they enforce it, or they look for confirmation of that, they're like, oh, well, this is bad. That animal's sleeping. They're not running around and playing. They must be upset and not having a good life. But like you said, without the zoo's resources, that animal would not even be alive, quite literally.
Exactly, because zoos and aquariums that are accredited have species survival programs or plans, and these plans are set in stone to where that like species of animal can have a genetic diversity amongst all zoos. Because that's another thing, people believe that people like caught animals and put them in like exhibits, is what they like to say, and we're not supposed to be saying that word, but I'm like, actually, did you know that all the zoos have a network of programs to make sure that animal has a diversity from way back when, and so they have a higher chance of surviving. And a lot of the times that species survival plan is put in place for reintroduction too. So it's not just for animals that might not be able to survive in the wild, but it's also for those who can, and we want to make sure that they can continue spreading their genes in a positive manner and they can survive for years beyond what they were originally supposed to.
Yeah, and a good example of a place, at least in Georgia, sorry if you're not in Georgia, but the Marine Science Center in Tybee Island in South Georgia. I visited that place for the first time earlier this year in March, and I fell in love with it. But it's basically a whole rehabilitation kind of center. Like, it is for education. They do have, animals in their tanks and whatever for people to walk around and see, almost like a mini aquarium. But it's all about education and saving sea turtles that they find, that are struggling, and they rehabilitate them to go back out into the wild. So that's really important to focus on the education and the rehabilitation part of it. Like, that's not a place necessarily for like, oh, let's just look at all these animals. Like, they focus a lot on the education, and so do a lot of other bigger zoos and aquariums. But I wish the general public would focus on that as well, and kind of see that vision of, okay, well, I need to be focusing on, this is a good program to have this, even on a larger scale. I can apply this to other places and other programs.
Exactly, because you never know what's going on behind the scenes.
Exactly.
And I know a lot of those places also have their own teams that specialize in those areas. And I know there's one called LED, Leadership and Energy and Environmental Design. And their main focus is making sure that like buildings are sustainable. And I think that's really important, because a lot of people are thinking of just like the habitats that they create for the animal that they have, but also the place that they're in should be sustainable too. Because interior is as important as the exterior. So people just disregard everything that could possibly be there or a part of this big, place, and they just are like, okay, this is in front of me. This is what I'm looking at. And I'm like, no.
No, there's so much more to it. You're just on the tip of the iceberg.
Yep. But it's hard to tell people things that they don't see or they don't believe would be there. So it's fighting stereotypes that is really just part of the struggle and all
Mhm.
of it, and why it's really important for you as the consumer and the person who's trying to learn to make sure that you're going to places that are
Mhm.
accredited, or that you do your research on where you're going
Yeah.
in general, other than just spreading misinformation and
Mhm.
disinformation. But that's most of what the points that I wanted to make,
Mhm.
because I think it goes right into species survival, like we were talking about the plans, but also in just conservation, refugees,
Mhm.
and other places that aren't zoos and aquariums, because we didn't even touch base on wildlife refuges
Yeah.
that are all over the place in national parks.
Mhm.
But most of those can the same things we're talking about here can be a credit to them too, because you
Absolutely.
don't know who's taking care of those places and who's in charge of making sure that they are being sustainable. There's a whole network out there that people don't know.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank y'all for tuning in. Like always, if you don't see us visually, you're missing our insider scoop at the very beginning. But if you are here, we love you anyways, and we can't wait for you. We can't wait to see where we go, and we hope to have you along.
Yeah. Bye, guys.